One. Hello, we're back to discuss and review Jamel Charlo versus Brian Castano, following on from our prediction from last week. Finally watched it yesterday morning. I didn't watch it live, but I did watch the whole fight. It's actually a really decent fight. Didn't go as we kind of predicted or expected, but yeah, what was your take on the fight?
Yeah, good fight. It was a good fight, and to be fair, did end up to be like pretty worthy of an undisputed or not far off.
Yeah.
My comments were suggesting otherwise. I suppose I'll get into like what surprised me, but I think there's a few things to talk about. You know, why it didn't go how we thought. Scorecards is probably another thing to talk about. And also, I think, you know, I look at it now and I go, if Castano had fought anyone half decent before that, like, is it Harrison that beat Charlo and then he came back and knocked him out? Like,
Tony Harrison,
Castano fought him and, you know, beaten him or knocked him out. I'm not sure they'd have knocked him out, but like beaten him. I think it would have been a bit more buzzing for this fight.
Yeah.
I think there's a guy that was kind of more talented than we thought, clearly that I thought, hold my hands up. But I think it's because it's so hard to judge a fighter like him who's not fought anyone at any level or real level, you know what I mean? I know he's a world champion, but there's world champions and world champions. And, you know, he's fought people that have come up in weight and stuff like that. And he fought at a lower weight a lot of the time. And so you just don't know a lot of things. And I think sometimes you need, just for the fight, you need to build people up by giving them a test. And fair play, they didn't want to probably take a risk and fight someone really lost. But in terms of the build-up of the fight, I think I would have gone into that going, this could be a cracker. You know, if he'd like beaten Harrison or something convincingly on point, I'd have been like, fight now.
It really surprised me as well. I thought Brian Castano started really, really well. I think he probably dropped the first round. Charlo looked like he was maybe, you know, a bit of an onslaught, looked like he might have even got him out of there. And then I think it was round 3, 2 and 3, I think were Castano rounds. And I think round 3, he really buckled Charlo at the knees. And he spent a lot of his time up against the ropes as well. And it just feels like he didn't really box a brilliant game plan. And I think it's partly he didn't box particularly well, didn't really kind of use his distance. And Castano was maybe a little bit better than we thought, and also can take a punch. You know, he did take some leather.
For me, I mean, I actually gave Charlo the first 2 rounds because I actually think he rocked Castano in the second round. It was the first. So I've got a bit of a flickering light here. It was in the second round. He did rock him, and I remember thinking, well, I didn't watch it live either. You ruined the result for me. Thanks for that in the morning. By sending me wow draw before I'd even watched it. So I can't in knowing what happened. But I think if I was watching that, I'd have been like, oh, this is the beginning of the end. Because he caught him with a counter left hook, which is, you know, he's more of a counter puncher, really, Charlo, and wobbled him, but he survived it. And then I think that could have been a knockdown, you know, in the third round. Charlo went slumping against the ropes. It's contentious, and it wasn't given a knockdown. But I think if it had been given a knockdown, I'm not sure they could have argued. I think maybe got away with that. You see it, you know. I remember when Price like chinned Povetkin. I think he gave him a standing count because he kind of went back into the ropes, and I think the ropes kept Charlo up there. But then from then, kind of grew in confidence. And I think 3 things happened that made our, you know, what we predict not work out. One, his chin, which I think you're right. He can take a punch, and that is one question mark we put in. We said we just didn't know how that's going to go. Is that coming through, that flickering light?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a little bit annoying. Why don't you go up to your office, or if you can.
Might be up there, but
it's not too bad. Yeah.
He could take a punch, and I think 2 things came from that. One, when he did get clocked, because he got clocked 2 or 3 times, he went back but could take it. But he was a bit more confident, and I thought as soon as he felt his power, it would put him more back in his shell, but it didn't. he kept coming forward. So his chin kind of meant it made two things. Two, he's a bit more. When I was looking at him on like highlights and stuff, the pressure didn't seem that educated. Do you know what I mean? But actually, in the fight, it was a lot more educated, and he was throwing feints, and it just seemed he knew what he was doing rather than just wailing, which in other fights he looked like he was wailing a bit.
Yeah.
And he kept his right hand up a lot. You know, he almost learned from that first counter left, and he was catching it a lot of time, and that was quite impressive. And then third, like you said, just don't think Charlo used his advantages.
No.
You know, reach, his jabbed a little bit, but didn't really do much off it and didn't really keep him away. So all those three things equaled, you know, the outcome that we got, and all three surprised me. Well, the chin, no, that's always a big question. But you would have thought him stepping up, Charlo, a big puncher, the likelihood is he wouldn't be able to take too many.
Yeah.
So I think that's how it unravelled for our prediction anyway.
Well, I think, I mean, you know, I've been high on the Charlos brothers for maybe 2 or 3 years now. I really thought that they were going to be the next big stars, you know, the next kind of like almost kind of like a double act, like Mayweather, like the way they boxed. I was just super impressed with them, but they had power as well, and they were exciting. But I just started to wonder if their stars are starting to fade a little bit. I mean, they're 31 now, I think.
Aren't they 33?
No, 31, I think. I was just wondering whether is that their star is fading a little bit, or is it Brian Castano's just kind of come along and has announced himself on the world stage and is going to be, you know, because really he should have got that decision. What was your take on we haven't talked about the decision yet, the scorecards. Yeah, they're 31. They're both 31.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I had Castano by 2 rounds, I think, or 2 points. Can't remember what it was.
I had it 7-5, yeah.
I think I had like 115, 113 or something like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be that bothered about a draw, you know, the result of a draw. One of those, I'm struggling to give any, you know, the win to Charlo.
Yeah.
A lot of it depends on what you like a lot of the time. It's so annoying. One of the scorecards was ridiculous. And this is the actual problem, really, because one of those scorecards, was it like 117, 112 or something like that?
117, 111.
111. And I think he scored one of the rounds, a 10-8 to Charlo. I think I heard that right. One of the rounds got scored a 10-8 in that judge. And it's like, I'm struggling to see a 10-8. If I see one 10-8, it might be the third round when Charlo got put on the ropes and nearly went down and ropes. So that's ridiculous. And this is what bugs me. I think if it had been a draw with very close scorecards, you know, instead of that 17-11, it'd been 1-1-5, 1-1-3, probably been less noise around it, you know, very close scorecards close. But then when you get one of them, this has happened a few times. Yeah. It's a weird result, and then one scorecard is out there. And you just and you do think, you know, dirty things at play, but if they are, would you make it that obvious?
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. When people say corruption, I don't think it is. I think it's potentially a mixture of influence. You know, it being influenced by the crowd. I know it's obviously an American crowd, and maybe bias towards the home fighter. I mean, it was Charlo's show. It was his. He was like the home fighter. I think it's a combination of all of that and a little bit of incompetence as well. I mean, but yeah, you're right. If it was corruption, then obviously they'd just lean a little bit more and just, you know, have a point or 2 points in it, so it's not as obvious.
I think as well, you know, one thing that was telling for me is I think in the last round, Charlo's corner was saying, "You've got to knock him out. You know, you've got to win this." So
they knew.
They knew it was tight. They
have
been instructed all the time, but I don't know.
But this is nothing new. We've seen this. Like, how many times have we seen this now? Unfair scorecards in the home fight. I mean, look at all the Canelo, you know, scorecards that we've seen over the years. You know, against Mayweather, when Mayweather was Mayweather. You know, it was a glorified sparring match at best, where you could probably give Canelo maybe one round if you're being generous. and there's one judge called it a draw. It's just ridiculous.
I think, did you say give Mayweather 1 round?
You'd give Canelo 1 round if you're being generous in their fight, and you know somebody gave it a draw.
Yeah, and that's where it gets
Okay,
really. So yeah, it's you know, unfortunate that particular scorecard came about. And again, it's like we've seen it with. It's not exactly the same, but we've seen it with, like, you know, I think of Yard, and you know, there doesn't seem to be any sense of danger earlier on enough that this is a very close fight. You need to up the gas. You know, maybe after 8 rounds or something like that, 9 rounds, this is close. You know, you need to act now. Don't say it like in the 11th going into the 12th round. And I don't know, boxers seem to always think about what they've done and forgot what's come back. And I think if you're going to have the style of going up on the ropes, you're always at a bit of disadvantage. That you know, if you've not landed anything and that guy just looks busier, probably going to lean to them.
Yeah.
And about, you know, in terms of Charlo, he may just have. There may just be boxers that come along, like anyone can have, that are just a bit of a kryptonite, and maybe someone who's busy, who's educated pressure, who can take a punch, he's going to struggle with. Not many of them. But I mean, a normal fighter with an average chin probably would have gone down in that second round. May have got up, but would have been a lot more tentative and probably would have been back down on the canvas 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. You know, if they can take that power that you're going to land every now and then. There's been a few fights where Charlie's not done that well. He's just found that power. But if you get someone that can just take it, then you need more opportunities. And
that's down to the trainer. The trainer's got to be, you know, they're the ones that are the perfect, you know, place to judge the fight and actually coach them and say, this is what we need to do. You know, this is what you need to step on the gas. I think, you know, Paddy Fitzpatrick, when he was training George Groves, you know, famously gave George Groves, you know, some pretty duff information when he was fighting Badu Jack for the WBC super middleweight. Fitzpatrick said, it's okay, you've got it, it's good. You know, he didn't tell him to step on the gas. I think that's why they split in the end, because Groves was obviously aggrieved of not getting the decision, and it was down to his trainer. When you're in the fight, you can't get a read on it. That's why they always say, am I up? Am I up? How am I doing? How am I doing? But yeah. So what would you like to see next out of this? Would you be? I mean, I'd be quite up for the rematch, to be honest. I think it's a much bigger fight now.
I think so, yeah. And it'd be out of the billing it probably deserved, really. I mean, I saw Crawford like making comments, and I heard like murmurs of. I mean, Crawford stepping up again, and you know, just fantasy stuff, isn't it? Really, I think worst case they'll go off and have another fight with someone else of not great caliber, both of them, and at best they'll have a rematch. Yeah,
well, they'll probably be able to do that because PBC are very famous for getting options on the fighters that are challenged. So they've probably got 2 or 3 fights with Castano now that can kind of match him up with somebody else, and then maybe do a rematch next year. That would be my bet. And then
because I simmer just a bit. I'm not talking what Wilder Fury simmering. If you take apart, have other fights, they both look good, and bring them back together, it can become a bigger fight than going straight in.
Yeah. All right, then let's wrap it up. We will do another video following the date has been confirmed for Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3. All right, thanks for listening.